This is how to perform every single skill move in FIFA 22. The description does in fact have every skill move listed with the minute that it is taught in this video. So if you want to skip to a particular one, then by all means, but without further ado, we're going to get into the intro and then I'm going to teach you guys every single skill move in FIFA 22.
Griezmann, 3 men around him to somehow find some space. Ronaldo, fantastic, opening the drive back.
He's made himself the tiniest bit of space.
Almost feels like a bit of a taunt. Didn't really go for it. Oh!
The display there is absolutely ridiculous. The Elastico on the goal line. On the goal line, the finest.
We
of
talked about
margins.
AussieFifa. He's not here to make up the numbers.
Juggling the ball, quite a simple one. You're just holding the L2 button and pressing or tapping the R1 button. And for Xbox, you're holding LT and RB, and that's all it is, lads. That's juggling the ball in FIFA 22. The body feint can be performed by using the right analog stick, and basically what you are doing is tapping either side to where the player is facing and then using the left analog stick to exit out to where you want to perform the body feint. So we're talking from a degree perspective, not a degree, from a clock perspective to make it easier for you guys. I'm flicking the right stick either 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock to where the player is facing, and yeah, basically they're going to perform the body feint. You then use the left stick, the left analog stick, to essentially exit out in the direction that you want to exit. One tip though I do want to mention is that if you are not, or if the controller is not picking up the body feint and it is not registering, then you need to double tap to the side of where the player is facing and it should register after you've done that. The step over can be performed again with the right analog stick and once again using the left analog stick to exit out in the direction that you want to exit. Now to perform the actual step over itself, what you're going to need to be doing is exiting in at a 12 o'clock angle and then rotating all the way around to 3 o'clock. Okay, that's to the right. If you want to do the step over to the left, you're then obviously entering in at 12 o'clock and then rotating it anti-clockwise around to 9 o'clock, and essentially the player will perform the step over, and then, as I was saying, you're using the left analog stick to exit out after they performed the step over in the direction that you want to exit. The reverse step over, pretty much the counterpart. Obviously it's in the name of the step over. It's similar controls as well, using the right and the left analog stick. Left obviously to exit out in the direction that you want to exit. To perform the actual reverse step over though, you need to exit in the opposite to what the step over is. So you're actually entering in where you would normally finish up on the regular step over. So if you want to do the step over to the reverse step over to the left, you're exiting or entering in at 9 o'clock and then rotating it all the way around to 12 o'clock to where the player is facing. Again, it's the same movement for the right side. If you want to do the reverse step over to the right side, you're entering in at 3 o'clock and then rotating it all the way around to 12 o'clock to perform that. Again though, it's obviously to where the player is facing. The ball roll can be performed with the right analog stick. Once again, you're basically entering in at a 3 o'clock or a 9 o'clock angle to where the player is facing and you're holding it. Basically the player will do a ball roll. Okay, this is actually a very useful skill move indeed in FIFA 22. The drag back can be performed with the R1 and L1 buttons, LB and RB on Xbox, and what you're doing is using the left analog stick to drag back behind to where the player is facing for him to perform the drag back. Now there is a bit of a twist to this. You can actually use this to exit out in a different direction, but you need to change direction as you were doing it. So if you want to do a drag back at a 90-degree angle, you need to drag it back to behind where the player is facing, and then you need to point either side, okay, where that player is facing, and basically then he will perform the drag back in the direction that you exit out. If we're talking from a clock perspective, what that is you are dragging the ball back whilst holding LB and RB or L1 and R1 with the left analog stick, entering in at a 6 o'clock angle. You are then moving it to where you want to exit out. So whether it's to the front, to the side, or completely behind. The heel flick, quite a useful skill move, and all you need to do is use that right analog stick, flick once forwards and once backwards to where the player is facing. From a clock perspective, that's obviously 12 o'clock, and then you're flicking back to 6 o'clock, obviously depending on where the player is facing, and basically they will perform the heel flick. Now, depending on how useful this heel flick is will depend on how many star skill moves your player has. A 5-star skill move player will perform this very cleanly, a 1-star skill move player will not, but that does mean that any player can use it, which is a good thing about this skill move. The flick up, very useful for doing a volley. All you need to do is quickly tap that right stick, and basically the player will do a scoop up for you to have a bit of fun and cross it in, or even have a volley. The roulette, what a skill move this is. You're basically using the right analog stick, and what you're doing is you're entering in at a 6 o'clock angle to where the player is facing, which is behind them obviously. You're then rotating it all the way around to the front of where the player is facing, so that's obviously 12 o'clock. So you're entering it at 6, you're then rotating it all the way around to 12, but you can choose on which direction you want to go. So if you rotate it from 6 o'clock to 12 o'clock around the left side, anti-clockwise, basically, that's actually clockwise, he will do a roulette to the left, and vice versa. If you're entering at 6, rotate it around to 12 on the right side, he'll do a roulette to the right. The fake left and go right, or the fake right and go left. Basically you need the right analog stick for this, and you're entering in at a 3 o'clock angle, rotating it all the way around to 9 o'clock, vice versa. If you want to do from the left to the right, you need to enter in at 9 o'clock and then rotate that all the way around to 3 o'clock, depending on where the player is facing, of course, with the right analog stick, and he'll perform this variation of skill moves. Juggling with the knees. Obviously you need to start juggling with this skill move to begin doing the knee juggle, but once it's up in the air, lads, all you need to do is press down that right analog stick and he will start juggling with his knees. The rainbow flick, once again another skill move that everyone can perform, but depending on the star skill moves that they have will depend on how clean it is. You need to perform it by using that right analog stick, pressing once backwards and then once to the front. So that's obviously 6 o'clock and you're pressing forward to 12 o'clock, and basically the player will do a rainbow flick. But again, I will stress to you, it does depend on how many skill moves, star skill moves, they have. Advanced rainbow, a 4-star skill move, yet again a similar movement to the rainbow, but what you're doing is you're pressing back once and then you're pressing forward twice. So it's once at 6 o'clock and then you're pressing or flicking forward at 12 o'clock twice, and the player will do the advanced rainbow. The feint left and exit right and the feint right and exit left can be performed by using that right analog stick and entering in at a 3 o'clock angle and then rotating that all the way around to 9 o'clock, and vice versa, entering in at 9 and rotating all the way around to 3 o'clock, and your player will perform this variation of skill moves. The BERBA spin, what a classic this is. What you need to do is you need to use that right analog stick and basically press once forwards and then once to either side of where the player is facing, depending on which direction you want to do the actual BERBA spin with. But from a clock perspective, that's obviously flicking forwards, which is 12 o'clock, and then either side, so 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock, obviously depending on where the player is facing. The ball roll cut, quite a fancy skill move this is. You're doing a similar movement to the ball roll, you're obviously using that right analog stick to press either side, so that's 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock, and you're holding that. But then, after you performed the ball roll once standing still, I do might add, you need to use that left analog stick to hold the opposite direction. The player will do a ball roll and then chop to the left or the right, depending on which direction you've done the ball roll to. The double touch exit, quite similar to the step over, and it's a similar movement. You're basically entering in with the right analog stick, obviously depending on which way you want to do the step over, at 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock, and then you're rotating that all the way around to 12 o'clock for the player to perform the step over, while standing still, but then what you need to do is you need to use the left analog stick to flick or hold the opposite way to where you've done the step over. And what they'll do is a step over and then flick it out to either side, and basically that's how you do that skill move. The double touch spin, what you need to do for this one is use that right analog stick to flick either side to where the player is facing, so left or right, 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock, and then what you need to do is use that left analog stick to flick diagonally the opposite direction to where you actually use the right analog stick. So if you flick to the right, you need to flick diagonally backwards, but the opposite direction, so to the left or where the player is facing, and obviously that's a 730 degrees. So if I'm flicking to the right with the right analog stick, which is 3 o'clock, and then what I need to do is use the left analog stick to flick diagonally the opposite direction, so that would be 730 basically, which is a diagonal direction backwards to where the player is facing. The scoop turn, what a skill move this is. Your 4-star and 5-star skillers can use this, but only your 5-star can do this whilst running. Basically what you need to do is use the fake shot buttons, and that is obviously the cross or the shoot button, subsequently with the pass button afterwards, and the player will do a scoop turn, which is like a bit, what's in the name, it's a scoop, okay? And yeah, basically that's how you perform that one. The Ronaldo chop, what a classic. You need to hold that L2 or LT button and basically do a fake shot. So that's obviously the cross or the shoot button, subsequently with the pass button afterwards, and then you need to use that left analog stick to point either left or right to where the player is facing, depending on which direction you want to do the Ronaldo chop in. Okay, so that's obviously 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock with that left stick. The advanced heel flick, basically you need to use that R1 button and RB as well, and it's a similar movement to the actual heel flick itself. You're flicking once forwards and once backwards to where the player is facing, so 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock, basically they'll performed the advanced heel flick. The fade pass, you need to be standing still for this one, but you need to also hold that L2 button whilst you perform a fade shot. So it's the cross button with the pass button afterwards, or the shoot button as well with the pass button afterwards. The ball roll chop, obviously a similar skill move to the ball roll, but you're basically doing a ball roll and then flicking or holding the opposite direction for them to do a chop, obviously in the opposite direction to where you've done the ball roll. So it's the right analog stick, you're holding down either side to where the player is facing, 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock, and you're holding that down, and then flicking or holding the opposite direction. So obviously it's again 6 o'clock, or 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock, depending on which direction you initially did the ball roll. The Neymar ball roll, basically for this one, lads, what you need to do is basically perform another ball roll using that right analog stick, so you're holding obviously 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock, and then you're continuing to basically hold down the left analog stick forwards to where the player is facing, and he will perform a fancy ball roll, or as they call it, the Neymar variation of the ball roll. The V drag, you're holding the R2 or the RT button, and basically you're performing a fade shot. So that's obviously shoot or cross with the pass button afterwards, and then what you're doing is holding the left analog stick diagonally to where the player is facing. So that's obviously at a 130 degree or a 1030 degree, so that's diagonally to where the player is facing, and he'll perform the V drag. The Elastico, I mean, what a skill move that was in FIFA 21. Basically what you need to do is hold in at a 3 o'clock angle with the right analog stick, and then rotate it all the way around to 9 o'clock. So you're rotating all the way around to the bottom, and this is obviously where the player is facing. So you're entering in the 3 o'clock, rotate all the way around past 6 onto 9 o'clock, and then the player will perform the Elastico. The reverse Elastico, yet again, similar to the Elastico itself, you're entering in at 9 o'clock, okay, with that right analog stick, and then you're rotating all the way around past 6 o'clock to 3 o'clock, and the player will perform the reverse Elastico. Quick ball rolls, a 5-star skill move, quite easy. You need to be standing still for this one, but you're basically using the right analog stick to hold backwards to where the player is facing. So that's 6 o'clock, and you're just holding that, and basically they will perform this fancy skill move. The Hocus Pocus, oh man, geez, it took me some time to practice this one back in the day, but basically you need to enter in at 6 o'clock with the right analog stick, rotate it all the way around to 9 o'clock, and then rotate from 9 o'clock all the way around to 3 o'clock. Okay, so it's entering in, rotating to 9, all the way back around to 3, and the player will perform the Hocus Pocus. The Triple Elastico, the opposite to the Hocus Pocus. Basically you're entering in at 6 o'clock once again, but rotating all the way around to 3 o'clock and then all the way back around to 9 o'clock, and the player will perform the Triple Elastico. The El Tornado, my god, does this skill move give me nightmares from FIFA 19, but you're holding down RB on Xbox or R1 on PS4, and basically what you're doing is you're flicking once forwards and then once either side to where the player is facing, and basically they will perform the fancy, well-known El Tornado. The Sombrero Flick, what a skill move this is, using that right analog stick, and basically what you're doing is you're flicking twice forward, so that's 12 o'clock, okay, and then you're flicking once backwards, so that's obviously 6 o'clock, so it's twice forwards, once back, and the player will perform the Sombrero Flick. The MCGEADY Spin, a 5-star skill move. Wow, what a skill move this is. Basically it's similar to the BERBA spin, you're flicking once forwards and once to the side of where the player is facing, and basically I do want to mention though, you do need to be slightly jogging for the player to perform the MCGEADY Spin. The fake Rabona, basically you need the L2 or the LT button and the fake shot variation, so it's either cross or shoot with pass afterwards, and then what you're doing is you're holding down with the left analog stick the opposite direction to where the player was initially running, okay, so it's 6 o'clock basically, so you're holding down L2, the PS5, you're then pressing the fake shot buttons, which is obviously cross or shoot with pass afterwards, and then you're holding down with the left analog stick the opposite direction. The open up fade shot, it's L1 and LB, and obviously it's in the name, the fade shot variation, shoot or cross with pass afterwards, and then you need to use the left analog stick to press forwards to where the player is facing, so it's 12 o'clock. Running flick ups, it's quite easy lads, just press that right stick as you're running with the ball, and as it's up in the air, and the player will do flick ups over the player's or defender's head as they run along. The ground sombrero, this is tricky as I tell you, but it's quite simple to perform. Basically you're just using that right analog stick, and as the ball is being received, hold it backwards to where the player is facing, so 6 o'clock to be precise, and the player will flick it over their head and run the opposite direction. The flare sombrero, quite similar again to the sombrero or the ground sombrero itself. Basically when the ball is in the air and you're running with it up in the air, you need to flick backwards to where the player is facing, so it's 6 o'clock, and basically the player will flick it over their head in a fancy sombrero flick motion. The special trap turn, quite simple. When the ball is being received, you need to hold that R1 button and then use that left analog stick to basically flick either side, and the player will take it in with their feet and do almost like a Rabona style touch, go in behind, and they'll start running along with it. The ball roll sombrero. Wow, this is a fancy skill move. You basically need to perform the ball roll with the right analog stick, so it's 3 o'clock holding, 9 o'clock holding, and then you're using that right analog stick and flicking it down, so they'll do a ball roll and then flick it up over the defender's head, so it's quite fancy indeed. The 3-touch roulette, you need to hold that LT button and the L2 button, and basically you need to flick with the right analog stick backwards to where the player is facing, so it's 6 o'clock, and then either side after that, so it's obviously 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock, and the player will basically perform the 3-touch roulette. The CROQUETA, nightmares from FIFA 19, hold that L1 or that LB button, and basically you need to hold either side to where the player is facing, so 6 o'clock sorry, not sits, 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock, and the player will perform the La Croqueta. Alternate Elastico chop. Once again, similar to the actual 3-touch roulette, you're holding down R1 or RB, and then you're using that right analog stick to flick once backwards, which is 6 o'clock, and then once either side. So 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock, and the player will perform the more advanced, Elastico chop. The OKOCHA flick, basically holding down that L1 or that LB button, lads, and then you're flicking or holding, the right analog stick forwards, and the player, once they're standing still, will flick the ball up just as OKOCHA did. The laces flick up, a fancy way of juggling in FIFA 22. Hold down L2 and then hold the R1 button, or RB of course, and basically the player will flick the ball up with their laces. The advanced flick up, again, it's another fancy way of starting to juggle. You need to hold that L2 on LT button, and then you need to press once the RB or the R1 button. Basically the player will flick the ball up in a fancy way. The Zombrero whilst juggling. You obviously need to juggle with this one, so you're holding down L2 and then tapping R1, but then what you need to do is with the right analog stick, hold the opposite direction to where the player is facing, and that will scoop the ball over their head just like a sombrero. Around the world, obviously you need to be juggling for this, so it's L2 and R1 or LT or RB, and basically what you need to do is you need to enter in, depending on which direction you want to do the around the world, at 3 o'clock, and then you're rotating all the way around clockwise to 12 o'clock, and then vice versa. You want to do around the world the opposite direction. You're entering in at 9 o'clock, you're then rotating all the way around to 12 o'clock at an anti-clockwise degree. The WAKA. Using that right analog stick, of course, lads, and what you need to be doing is entering in at either a 3 o'clock or a 9 o'clock degree. You're then rotating all the way around to 12 o'clock, and then what you need to do is flick the left analog stick the opposite direction. So it's obviously entering in at 3 and then going around to 12, it's flicking that left stick to the right and holding it, and basically the player will perform the WAKA. The BOLASIE flick, what a skill move this is, but it does remind me of FIFA 19. Use that L1 or LB button, lads, and then basically you need to press forwards and then to the side. So it's 12 o'clock and then to 3 or 9 o'clock, and the player will perform the BOLASIE flick. The fancy drag back, hold L2 or obviously LT, you then need to use the left analog stick to point forwards, and then you need to perform a feint shot, so it's shoot or cross with pass subsequently afterwards. The drag back fade. Basically, lads, it's similar to the drag back, of course, similar controls I might add. You need the R1 and the L1 buttons, and obviously the LB and RB buttons, and then you need to enter in at 6 o'clock with the right analog stick, rotate all the way around to either 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock, and then rotate the opposite direction, okay, around to either 3 or 9. So if you're entering in at 6 and rotating it around to 3, then you need to rotate it all the way around to 9, okay, and the player will perform the drag back fake, and again vice versa, into 6, around to 9, back around to 3. The FLAIR roulette. What you need to do is hold down that L1 or LB button and basically use the right analog stick to enter in at 6 o'clock and then rotate all the way around to 12 o'clock. Now you can decide whether you want to do clockwise or anti-clockwise, but basically that will decide on which direction you do the actual FLAIR roulette, but that's how you perform it. The setup touch, R1, RB, and use that right analog stick to basically point in the direction that you want to flick the ball to set up the touch and ultimately set up a shot. The feint and exit. Hold down that L1 and LB button, and basically what you need to do is enter in at 9 o'clock with the right analog stick and rotate around the bottom to 3 o'clock, and the player will perform that skill move. The Drag Back Sombrero, a very fancy skill move indeed. Hold down that R1 or RB button. You then need to hold down with the left analog stick backwards to where the player is facing. So it's obviously set to clock, but as you're doing that, you need to click down the right stick, and the player will perform the Drag Back Sombrero. The drag to drag, very, very useful in my opinion. You need to use that L2 and LT button, and then you need to perform a fade shot. Let go of the left analog stick and perform the fade shot. So it's cross or shoot with pass subsequently afterwards. The feint, forward and turn. Use that right analog stick and flick backwards twice, lads, and the player will basically perform a feint, forward and turn. The bull roll, fake turn. Hold down that RT or the R2 button, and basically you need to press once forwards and then once to the side of where the player is facing. So 12 o'clock and either 3 or 9 o'clock, and that will depend on which direction that you want to exit out. The drag to heel, you do pretty much need to basically be standing still for this one, but hold down the L1 and the LB button, and then you need to press forwards and then to the side of where the player is facing, depending on which direction you want to do this skill move. The bridge skill, what a nightmare this was last year. Double tap that R1, lads, and basically the player will do a very far kick out in front of them for them to run onto it. Nutmeg, nutty as they like to say. Hold down that R1 L1 button, RB, LB, and basically you need to use that left analog stick to press forwards to try and get the ball through the defender's legs. The directional nutmeg, yet again another skill move that was a nightmare in FIFA 21. Hold down R1 and L1 and use that left analog stick to essentially point in the direction that you want to do the directional nutmeg. The skilled bridge, brought to you this year in FIFA 22. L2 or LT are the buttons you need, and basically you need to obviously double tap that R1 button, similar to the obviously the bridge skill, but it's more fancy. The 4-touch skill, very, very similar to the 3-touch roulette. Hold down that L2 or LT button and then flick backwards to where the player is facing, and they will perform this new skill move in FIFA 22. The first time spin, quite a fancy skill move. Hold down that L1 and R1 button or LB and RB as they receive the ball, and they will do almost like a tornado style spin. The scoop turn fake, probably only really a skill move that you can use with a 5-star skiller, but you basically need to do a fade shot with the cross shoot and then subsequently with the pass afterwards, and then what you need to do is you need to press in the opposite direction with the left analog stick of where or to where you did the original scoop turn. So if you scoop turn to the right, flick the left stick to the left, vice versa. The fake shot stop, very simple to perform and a very overpowered skill move indeed. All you have to do is press the shoot or the cross button with pass subsequently afterwards, but you need to drop the left stick. That's very important, otherwise they're going to perform just a regular fake shot. The fake shot, I believe one of the first skill moves ever brought out in any single FIFA that has been released. All you need to do is press the shoot or cross button with pass subsequently afterwards. You need to be quick in the execution, but once you do, they'll perform the fake shot, and you use the left stick basically to essentially point in the direction that you want to do the fake shot. The spin skill move, hold down R1 or RB on that spots, and then you need to enter in with the right analog stick at 6 o'clock, then rotate around clockwise to 12 o'clock. So it's from 6 all the way around to 12, and the player will perform the spin skill move, similar to the diagonal trigger that was a few years ago, but it's a little bit different. The shot cancel, pretty easy to perform if I'm quite honest. You just need to hold down that shoot button and then trigger the cancel. Okay, so it's L2 and R2 at the same time, and it's different to the fade shot. The fade shot is more of a cut. They'll lift their foot and cut either side to where you point with the left stick, but the shot cancel allows you to dribble in and out of opponents' tackles, and that's the difference between both of them. And one more thing is the shot cancel allows you to make the keeper dive. So it is a very useful skill move, and yeah, I like this one definitely. The DINK touch, new to FIFA 22. You just need the right analog stick and you're pressing down the R3 trigger and using that left analog stick to point either direction for the player to do a turn or a DINK touch to either side of where the defender is approaching you so that you can get away from him. Explosive sprint, another new skill move, or at least way of bursting off into the space for FIFA 22. You just need to press down R2 and L2, or RT and LT on your controller, and the player will do a kick out in front of him, and it's more of an explosive sprint which gets over the defender's tackle. Okay, if you're having trouble with this registering, all I recommend you guys is tapping twice. Okay, tapping those buttons twice for it to register better in bad gameplay. The knock-on, a new feature in FIFA 22. It's similar to the speed boost where you flick the right analog stick, but for it to be a knock-on, flick-on, you need to press it twice or even 3 times, and the player will do a very large kick out in front of him for him to run onto it. It's very good with your pacey players indeed. Advanced Elastico chop. Hold down that R1 or RB button and then flick backwards to where the player is facing and then to the left of where he is facing. Okay, so that's backwards at 6 o'clock and then to 9 o'clock. Okay, and the player will perform the advanced Elastico chop. The chest flick. You just need to be dribbling for this, so it's your typical L2 or LT and R1 and RB. You're tapping that, but as the ball's in the air, you need to flick or click the right analog stick down to the R3 trigger around 2 or 3 times, and the player will do a chest flick. Elastico while juggling. Again, you need to be juggling for this, so L2 and R1 or LT and RB, and then you need to, with the right analog stick, flick to the right and then to the left of where the player is facing. So from 3 o'clock and then to 9 o'clock, and the player will perform Elastico whilst he is juggling. The reverse Elastico whilst juggling. Again, it's similar to the actual Elastico version of this. You need to obviously be juggling, so it's L2 and R1 or LT and RB. You're tapping that, and then as you're doing that, you need to flick to the left and then to the right with the right analog stick. So that's 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock, and the player will perform a reverse Elastico whilst he is juggling. The heel to heel 2-star variation. You just need to hold down that L2 or LT button and then perform a fake shot. So it's cross with pass subsequently afterwards, or shoot with pass subsequently afterwards, and then you need to point the left analog stick straight to where the player is facing, so forward, so it's 12 o'clock. And the player performs a less advanced version of the heel flick, but it's a heel to heel version, so it's from the heel in the name, it's from the heel to the heel forward. The Zombrero side whilst juggling. You just need to be juggling at the same time and then flick either side with the right analog stick. So it's either 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock, and the player does a Zombrero flick to the left or to the right. The Rabona finish. All you need to be doing for this is holding down that L2 button and then shoot after you've held that down. The player does perform a Rabona. Now, if it's struggling or you're struggling to make this register, just hold down the R1 or RB button whilst you're doing the L2 trigger and shooting, and the player does, it'll be more likely for him to register it because it's more like a curving or a curled Rabona. Strafe dribbling. Just hold down that L1 or LB button and then use the left analog stick to move about and move backwards, and the player does the strafe dribbling movement. Agile dribbling, brought to you last year in FIFA 21. Just hold down that R1 or RB button and then dribble with the left analog stick, okay? And he will do a more agile version of dribbling in FIFA 22. The Rabona cross, just hold down L2 and then press the cross button, okay, and the player will do a Rabona kick into the box for your player to header it on. The sombrero whilst juggling, just need to be juggling for this. So L2 and RB or R1 and or LT and RB, and basically then you need to use the left analog stick to flick either left or right to where the player is facing, and he will perform a sombrero whilst juggling to the side. The flick up whilst juggling, just be juggling for this, lads. So L2 and R1 or LT and RB, and then you need to flick down or flick or click the R3 button, the right stick, and he will flick the ball up for you to then maybe do a subsequent chest flick or whatever skill move you like. The reverse double around the world, you just need to be juggling for this. So L2 and RB, or sorry, R1 and then LT and RB, and then you need to flick with the right analog stick or curl the right analog stick and enter in at 9 o'clock, then rotate all the way around to 6 o'clock, and the player will do a reversed double around the world. The reverse around the world, you just need to be juggling, so L2 and R1 or LT and RB, and then you need to enter in with the right analog stick at 9 o'clock, then rotate all the way around, okay, anti-clockwise to around that 3 o'clock or 12 o'clock area, and he will do the reverse around the world. The sombrero flicker on, just need to be receiving the ball in the air and then hold down that L2 button and then press the cross button for him to do a flick on like the sombrero version. The rainbow flick whilst juggling, just need to be holding down L2 and then tapping R1 or LT and RB, and then you need to do with the right analog stick backwards then forward, so it's 6 o'clock then to 12 o'clock, and the player does a rainbow flick whilst juggling. The heel to heel 3-star variation, exactly the same as the heel flick, the 4-star variation. You just need to flick once forwards and then once backwards to where the player is facing, and he will perform the 3-star version of the heel flick. The half drag back, all you need to do is basically hold in R1 and L1 and basically flick backwards, so 6 o'clock to where the player is facing, and drop it. Okay, so you're basically doing a drag back, but you're dropping it halfway for them to perform a half drag back and draw that defender in. The ball roll fake 5-star variation, similar to the ball roll chop, as you will know it by, but basically what you're doing is you are standing still when you perform this, so you need to hold it either 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock to where the player is facing, so either left or right, and then you need to hold the opposite way as they do the ball roll. Okay, so it's to the right then to the left, so from 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock or from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock, and the player, if they have 5-star skills, will do a ball roll into a fake Rabona, okay, and they will remain standing still. The drag back, spin left and right. All you need to do for this one is flick the right analog stick backwards to where the player is facing, and then flick either right or left to where they are facing, okay? So it's backwards, which is 6 o'clock, and then it's either 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock to determine which side they will do this skill move. Scoop turn, 5-star variation. I know a lot of you guys have trouble performing this, specifically with your 5-star skill. As one tip I can give you is when you're doing the scoop turn, which is a fake shot, which is either cross or shoot with pass afterwards, you need to point the left analog stick diagonally forwards to where the player is facing, not to the side, but by diagonally forwards, and the player will do a scoop turn off the back of that, and it's almost like a speed boost, and that's the best thing about the 5-star variation of the scoop turn, is it allows you to boost into the space. Stop, stand still. I had to add this one in as it is quite a handy way of stopping the ball, as you know, I'm going to call it a skill move in FIFA 22, and all players can do it. You just need to tap L1, and what will happen is the player will automatically stand still, and what that allows you to do is do a subsequent skill move afterwards, whether it's an elastico, whether it's a scoop turn, whatnot, but it's very, very good because of how versatile it is. The fake shot speed boost. Not as good as last year, but still quite usable in FIFA 22. What you're doing for this is as you're sprinting and holding that R2 or RT button, you need to perform a fake shot, but as you do it, hold the left analog stick in a diagonal direction forwards to where the player is facing. Okay, so that would be either 130 or 10:30, and the player will do a speed boost light fade shot into the space so that you can bypass the defender to get in behind and obviously score a goal. The ball hop, you need to be standing still for this one. You just need to hold down L1 and then press down the R3 button, which is the right analog stick, and the player will hop with the ball. The reverse toe bounce, you just need to be juggling for this, so it's L2 or LT and RB or R1, and you need to be tapping that as you're doing this, and then as you're doing that you need to hold with the right analog stick either left or either right to where the player is facing. Okay, so either 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock, and the player will do a reverse or reverse toe bounce as they're juggling. The Henri pass, quite a fancy way of passing this year as a skill move. All you need to do is hold down LT or L2, and then you need to point diagonally forwards to the left of where the player is facing. Okay, so that's 10:30, and then you need to do a regular pass, and the player will do the variation of pass, which is called the Henri pass. The bicycle pass, the ball needs to be in the vicinity of the player's head for this, or at least chest, for them to perform this, and basically as you're passing you need to hold down L2. Now this will work if you are passing behind to where the player is facing and the ball is in the air. The roulette pass, you just need to be holding down L2 or LT, and then you need to be pointing forwards with the left analog stick and then press pass as you're doing that, and the player will do the roulette pass. The drag back pass, you need to learn a drag back for this, and then you obviously need to pass as you're performing it. So you're holding down R1 and L1 or RB and LB on net spots, you're then dragging back 6 o'clock to where the player is facing, so behind where he is facing, and as he is just dragging that ball back, press the pass button, and the player will do a drag back and then into a pass. The back heel pass, very good if you want to make a pass to the player who is situated behind you. You just need to hold down L2 or LT and then point the left analog stick backwards to where the player is facing, so the opposite direction to where he is facing, and then you need to press that pass button. The scoop pass, quite a fancy way of passing in FIFA 22. Just hold down L2 or LT and then press the cross button, which is X or square. Okay, square on PS4 and X on Xbox, and basically the player will scoop the ball up into the vicinity of the player that you are passing to. The fade shot stop in different directions. All you need is the fade shot button variations and the R1 button and the left analog stick. Basically what you need to do is, as you're doing the fade shot stop, which can be performed by pressing the cross or shoot button with pass subsequently afterwards, you then need to hold down R1 as you're doing it, okay, and point in a certain direction on the pitch that you want to face after doing the fade shot stop. Okay, and he will face that direction as you let go of all of the buttons. So you need to perform this, but then you need to let go of all the buttons for him to then stop the ball and do the fade shot stop and face in a certain direction. The Rabona pass, quite simple, just hold down that L2 or LT button and then press the pass button, which is obviously A or X, and the player will do a Rabona pass into the player that you are aiming at. Now you do need to press forwards with the left analog stick, which is the same direction to where the player is originally facing. The double touch exit, just enter in with the right analog stick at 3 o'clock, then rotate around anti-clockwise around to 9 o'clock. So it's from the right side of the player all the way around to the left side, and as you're doing that you need to flick with the left analog stick forwards diagonally to the right, so that's 130, okay, and the player will perform the double touch exit. The FLAIR fade shot, hold down L2 or LT and then perform a fade shot whilst you're standing still. So it's either obviously shoot or cross with the pass buttons pressed subsequently afterwards, and he will do a very high kick into the air past the ball, and it's in the name, it's the FLAIR fade shot. The lane change, holding R1 or RB and then flick either side to where the player is facing. So either 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock, and then flick to the opposite side. So it's either 3 or 9. So you're going from right to left or left to right, and that will perform the lane change. Well, that will signal the end of this all skill mode tutorial for FIFA 22. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If I missed any, please let me know in the comment section down below. I do apologize if I did. This video took me a very long time to make, so if you could support me, drop a like, subscribe, and follow me on my socials, that would be much appreciated, lads. But I hope you guys have a good day. I'm out. Sayonara, au revoir, adios, and goodbye.